This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
نشرة الأخبار من قناة الجزيرة في قطر. السلام عليكم.
The International Compact for Iraq, which aims at achieving economic and political stability in the country, was unanimously endorsed at the International Conference on Iraq's Security in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. Iraqi Prime Minister Nuri al-Maliki said that the main objective of the compact is to build a united, democratic, and federal Iraq. U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice met with her Syrian counterpart Walid al-Muallim on the conference's sidelines.
The International Compact for Iraq was presented under the slogan Common Vision and Shared Commitments at the International Conference on Iraq's Security. The Iraqi Prime Minister summed up his answer by calling on the international community to support his government in order to counter what he called terrorism. Maliki presented the efforts that his government has been exerting during the last period as a way to gain the attendees' support for his plans for the National Reconciliation Initiative and for dismantling the armed militias.
لقد بادرت حكومة الوحدة الوطنية ومنذ اليوم الأول لتشكيلها.
Since its first day in office, the National Unity Government started expanding political participation based on the National Reconciliation Initiative in order to promote dialogue and tolerance. All that may threaten the fabric of the Iraq society must be avoided. We assure you that the National Unity Government has a serious plan to disarm the militias and for only allowing government employees to carry weapons. The militias and the rule of law cannot coexist.
The attendees did not need anyone to convince them about the threat, but they also view as terrorism in Iraq and elsewhere. Most of them, however, differed on how to counter this phenomena, as well as on what operations constitute acts of terrorism.
Iraq is at a critical juncture. Political solutions are important to establish the foundations of a prosperous and peaceful country. The Iraqi government has committed itself to a number of important initiatives to promote dialogue and reconciliation.
The endorsement of Arab and international aid to the Iraqi government may pave the way for future comprehensive solutions to the Iraqi problem and a new approach to the political map. Optimists believe that the aid to the Iraqi government that will be endorsed during this conference will create a new reality in Iraq. Pessimists, however, believe that as long as the political and security situation remains unchanged, the resolutions reached in this conference or others will only be ink on paper.
While world politicians are gathering in Egypt to help bring Iraq out of its crisis, many Iraqis believe that these meetings are unproductive unless they bring positive results on the ground. From the violent streets of Baghdad, Iraqis expressed mixed reactions on the Sharm el-Sheikh conference.
We are hopeful and ambitious that the Sharm el-Sheikh conference will bring good news to everyone, especially to the Iraqi people.
None of these conferences have led to any solutions that can help improve the situation in Iraq.
The National Reconciliation Initiative is only a slogan used by politicians.
We hope that the Arab states will take a positive position and support Iraq.
The Sharm el-Sheikh conference in Egypt is merely a retreat for the Arab leaders. Sharm el-Sheikh is a beautiful place to visit.
All these conferences are useless. It does not matter whether they are held in Iraq, Jordan, or even Syria.
I hope that the convening countries in the Sharm el-Sheikh conference will take resolutions that are productive.
While the politicians in Sharm el-Sheikh are looking for the shortest way possible to secure Iraq, the violence continues to travel in the fast lane in the Iraqi capital, where more civilians were killed today. The town of Mahmoudiyya woke up today to the sound of mortar shells that fell in a residential neighborhood, killing 3 people and injuring more than 15 others. Meanwhile, in Baghdad, a booby-trapped vehicle exploded near a police station in Sadr city, killing 10 people and injuring more than 35 others. Also in Baghdad, Iraq's Interior Deputy Minister Hussein Kamal announced that Abu Umar al-Baghdadi, the head of the so-called Islamic State of Iraq, has been killed, and his body is in the possession of the Iraqi authorities. In another related development, the showdown between the White House and the Democratic-led Congress does not seem to be ending anytime soon, despite the veto decision by President George W. Bush. The Democrats want to end the war in Iraq, a position that enjoys a wide popular support among the American people. In addition, Democrats who maintain control of the Congress want to override the presidential veto. Meanwhile, top congressional Democrats and President Bush started talks on ending their deadlock over the Iraq war funding bill.
I am confident that we can reach an agreement. I know that in order to reach an agreement, both sides must show good intentions. We all look out for the best interests of our country, and we are concerned about this problem. I thank the Democrats in Congress who came to the meeting, and I look forward to holding constructive talks with them.
The president chose to criticize the bill. He clarified his position, and we clarified ours. The time has come to work together. But make no mistake, the Democrats are committed to end this war, and we hope we can do this by adopting a united position with the President of the United States.
A security conference to bring the region's support for the Iraqi government opened in the Egyptian Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh Thursday. The international conference overwhelmingly adopted a 5-year plan aimed at rescuing the war-ravaged country from chaos and bankruptcy. The so-called International Compact, Iraq and the UN floated back on June 28, 2006, has focused on Iraq's security improvement and economic recovery. Foreign Minister Sheikh was one of the participants who addressed the meeting to stabilize Iraq.
The security situation in Iraq, which is primarily caused by the flawed policies of the occupying powers, overshadows efforts to deal with other issues. The elected government of Iraq and its people are doing their best to make progress in political, economic, social, and cultural spheres.
Mottaki added Tehran has always backed the Iraqi political procedure, including general election. He said efforts need to be made to omit the foreign intervention in the Iraqi internal affairs, adding the post-invasion country should maintain its Islamic and Arab identity. Thursday's meeting also had the Iraqi Prime Minister, the Arab League Secretary General, and foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, China, the US, and the host lay out their viewpoints. Still in Sharm el-Sheikh, Mottaki and U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice had a brief exchange on the sidelines of the Iraq Security Conference. The short conversation happened over lunch, attended by the foreign ministers present at a 2-day international gathering. Also today, Mottaki held a brief meeting with British Foreign Secretary Margaret Beckett and the Saudi Foreign Minister. Earlier in the day, the Iranian top diplomat told his Iraqi counterpart Hoshyar Zebari Iran is ready to cooperate with Baghdad on reconstruction drive of Iraq and restoration of peace and stability to the country. At home, President Ahmadinejad says Iran is entitled to make full use of its nuclear capacity and will never give up its inalienable right. The president told locals in Kahnuj, Kerman province, Iranians are ready to take a leap forward, but the enemies are against the progress, development and welfare of Iran. He said the enemy presumes it can block the progress of Iranians by economic sanctions, but that the nation will not give up even an iota of its legitimate nuclear rights. Earlier in the day, Ahmadinejad said in Jiroft, Iran accepts talks on Iraq if only the rights of the Iraqi nation and the constitution are recognized. He added the best solution to restore peace and security to Iraq is backing the government and withdrawal of foreign forces. The World Bank announced Thursday it is ready to invest in the project aimed at transferring Iran's natural gas to the Indian subcontinent if it receives calls for cooperation. The announcement comes at a time Washington stops at nothing to throw a spanner into the works of the giant peace pipeline project. In another development, India's Petroleum and Natural Gas Minister Murli Diora said Delhi is pursuing a project to import natural gas from Iran to guarantee it can meet its energy demands. The minister added India defies all pressures to act otherwise. Diora ruled out the possibility of interference by the US or any other countries in India's domestic affairs.
And tonight's top story, a mass rally calling on Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and Defense Minister Amir Peretz to resign immediately is scheduled to take place this evening at Rabin Square, starting in a few hours from now. According to police estimates, some 150,000 demonstrators are expected at the event. The rally was organized by the Forum of Bereaved Families, Reserve Soldiers Groups, and student unions. Reserve Major General Uzi Dayan, one of the organizers, told Army Radio this morning that the aim of the rally was to make it clear to the Prime Minister, Defense Minister, and the rest of the Knesset that it's time they took responsibility. He said that a square packed with people will send a message to the entire population that they need to come out and shout, "Enough." IBA's diplomatic correspondent Leah Zinder now joins us live in Rabin Square in Tel Aviv. Leah?
Yes, hi Yochanan, hi Laura from Rabin Square. The organizers are hoping that hundreds of thousands of people here at Rabin Square will spark a tidal wave of public opinion that will bring down Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. But it has to be said that at this time, on the eve of the first anniversary of the swearing in of the government, Prime Minister Olmert's situation doesn't look too bad. It's stable, not out of danger yet. Last night, Prime Minister Olmert scored a significant victory in his own Kadima faction in the Knesset, when the faction stood firmly behind the Prime Minister. Only 3 members of Kadima opposed him: Marina Solodkin, the coalition chairman Avigdor Yitzhaki, and of course Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni, in a day that the Foreign Minister would rather forget. At her dramatic press conference, she did not resign. She did not demand Olmert's resignation. She merely said she'd suggested to him that he resign. She's staying on. The question remains, how can she represent the Prime Minister before the world if she no longer believes in him? Today, Foreign Minister Livni was savaged by the press. One of the leading dailies said that she looked like a frightened rabbit caught in the headlines, although I think that one must give her credit for being the only Kadima minister to stand up to the Prime Minister. Now, the question remaining open is, will Prime Minister Olmert fire his foreign minister? Most estimates say no, he will not. Aides say he may just hang her out to dry. But for tonight, 7 o'clock, 2 hours from now exactly, the eyes of Ehud Olmert and of the entire nation are right here at the town square, Rabin Square, with all of its resonances and its history. And for now, back to you in the studio in Jerusalem.
Thank you, Leah Zinder. The Knesset today held a special session to discuss the findings of the Winograd report. Speaking for the first time since the release of the report, opposition leader Benjamin Netanyahu called on the Prime Minister to resign immediately and urged the new elections be held as soon as possible. Netanyahu said it is clear the current leadership has lost the faith of the public, if it had any to begin with. Those who failed at war cannot be those who fixed the mistakes. Vice Premier Shimon Peres defended the cabinet's decision to go to war. Peres said only those who act in the first place make mistakes. Peres stressed that the government is working to correct the failures highlighted in the Winograd report. Prime Minister Olmert, who was present at the debate, did not address the plenum, while Defense Minister Amir Peretz was conspicuously absent from the entire debate. The special session was attended by bereaved parents who expressed anger at Olmert's decision not to address the plenum. Here's what a few MKs had to say prior to the debate.
And they would like to see a new leadership taking power in Israel. I think that the findings in Winograd, the report, were very severe, very serious, that cannot enable this government to stay in power.
I believe that the present government led by Prime Minister Olmert is not going to survive for long. I definitely see a close resignation of Prime Minister Olmert and Defense Minister Peretz. The Labour Party is going to gather on May 13 to take a decision to leave the government if Olmert and Peretz are going to stay in their offices until then. And I believe that in the near future, we will try to restructure a new government at the present Knesset.
In a rare appraisal, Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah says he respects Israel for issuing the damning report on last year's war on Lebanon. At a book fair in Beirut's southern suburbs on Wednesday, Nasrallah said, quote, "It is worth every respect when an inquiry commission is appointed by Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert and it condemns Olmert." Nasrallah added, quote, "One can only respect the butcher's enemy leaders when they work day and night for their prisoners." A different tone echoed at the Sarai. Prime Minister Nuri regrets that the Israeli inquiry into last year's war has failed to learn the real lesson that military offensives do not bring security. He is referring to successive major Israeli operations against Lebanon in 1978, 1982, 1993, 1996, and 2006. Senora says the Winograd Commission of Inquiry's interim report does not criticize the principle of the war itself, despite the huge destruction and loss of life it entailed. The premier stressed that peace would only come to the region once Israel accepts a 5-year-old Arab Peace Initiative. It offers Israel for normalization of relations in return for a full withdrawal from the territories it occupies since 1967.
There must have been some kind of an understanding between Israel and Syria, because the Syrian businessman who communicated between the two countries said that Syria made a decision not to open a war front in the Golan Heights during the Israeli war in Lebanon.
I would not call this an understanding. I would call it a passive agreement, which means that the two were thinking similarly. In any case, Hezbollah did not need help from Syria. To the contrary, it was doing well. Syria only supported it by supplying it with missiles. It sent so many missiles to Lebanon until Hezbollah started complaining that it had no more space to store them. A large amount of missiles were sent to Lebanon and they are still present there. We have been talking about the possibility of launching a war against Iran, but the war might be launched against Syria instead. Israel may launch this war to force Syria into making peace. This scenario may happen after the elections, which may bring Ehud Barak back to power should the Winograd's report lead to the resignation of Ehud Olmert and the collapse of his government.
ممكن يؤدي إلى فصله أو طرده أو ما بعرف الحكومة كلها سوا.
كمان في هناك بعض المحللين الاستراتيجيين الذين يذكرون بتصريحات.
Some strategists referred to an Iranian statement made during the last war in Lebanon. At the time, Iranian officials threatened that Iran would intervene if Syria was attacked. Based on this, is it possible that the United States or Israel or any other country will attack Syria to drag Iran into the war?
لجر إيران إلى معركة معينة. يعني بدي أسأل نفس السؤال لأنه قالوا إذا ضرب حزب الله نحن ما نتدخل.
Before the war in Lebanon, the Iranians said that Iran would intervene if Hezbollah was attacked, but they never intervened. You must understand that the Iranians are more pragmatic than the Arabs. For example, not a single Arab leader had ever said that he was defeated, but Iran's former supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khomeini, acknowledged that Iran had lost the war against Iraq. He said that acknowledging defeat is harder than drinking poison, but he still acknowledged the defeat. Iran will not do anything if it feels that would provoke an attack on it or cause its economy to collapse. Iran does not have the means. If it were to use its aircrafts, they would be downed before arriving to their targets. If it were to use its missiles, they would not be effective. Saddam Hussein previously tried to do that. He launched 35 missiles, but they did not have much of an impact on Israel besides creating fear. We must know that there is a school of thought in the US administration that believes that the threat of Hezbollah and Hamas would disappear if Iran is attacked. This is why Iraq was attacked. At the time, Saddam used to say that if you attack me, then the entire world will turn upside down. This is why the late Jordanian King Hussein and Arafat supported him. They believed that the entire world would turn upside down if Saddam was attacked. But in reality, he was attacked and nothing happened. And before he was expelled from Kuwait and nothing happened.
طيب كمان في هذه الاحتمالات تتحدث عن الغرب تتحدث عن
We talked about the West, Europe, France and the United States. But for the sake of argument, if a war erupts against Iran, what will Russia and China do? Will they limit their reactions to condemnations and verbal criticism, or will they act because they do not want to lose their interests in Iran?
China and Russia are waiting for the US to fall into another crisis so they can rejoice. Putin still remembers that the American intervention in Afghanistan was one of the main reasons behind the collapse of the former Soviet Union. The Americans retaliated against the Russian intervention in Vietnam by intervening in Afghanistan. I think that Putin has been encouraging Iran to act in a way that may create another crisis for the US. Putin wants the Americans to stay in Iraq, and he wants them to sink deeper with the Europeans in Afghanistan. This would be better for the re-emerging powers, Russia and China.
وتستعيد قوتها وبدها شوية راحة اللي هي روسيا واللي هي الصين.
Mediated by the King of Saudi Arabia, Abdullah bin Abdulaziz, Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir and Chadian President Idris Deby signed a treaty in Riyadh to reconcile between their two countries. The trilateral summit was held this afternoon in King Abdullah's ranch in Ghanadiriya to finalize the reconciliation deal. The following report sheds light on the backdrop to the relationship between Sudan and the Islamic Republic of Chad.
The conflict between Sudan and Chad has its historical roots in the mid-80s when Libya and Chad trespassed into the region of Darfur during the Libyan-Chadian War. Khartoum played a role in the internal politics of Chad, supporting the current president, Idris Deby, to overthrow his predecessor, Hussein al-Habri, in 1990. The relationship between the two countries was stable until 2004. While N'Janima was supporting armed rebels in Darfur, Deby accused Khartoum of supporting an attempt to oust him in April of last year. Chad has been dragged into the Darfur crisis since it shares a 750-kilometer-long border with Sudan and is located west of the Sudanese region of Darfur. The areas of Janina, Altina, and Kolbus in the western state of Darfur witnessed a Chadian military incursion, including the killing of 17 Sudanese soldiers last month at the hands of the Chadian army. In return, the area of Adri in Chad also witnessed a Sudanese army incursion in clashes that took place last month. All regional and international attempts to reconcile between the two countries had failed. The last attempt was during the most recent Francophone summit. However, Riyadh succeeded in reconciling between the two parties today. Mazen Aman, Al Arabiya. Morocco and the Polisario Front have agreed to hold talks under the auspices of the United Nations. The Security Council urged both sides to engage in direct negotiations without preconditions in order to help end the nearly 3 decades-long dispute over the Western Sahara.
The Security Council, which agreed to renew the mandate of the United Nations mission for the referendum in the Western Sahara, MINURSO, called on the Kingdom of Morocco and the Polisario Front to hold direct talks without preconditions. The Council urged both sides to sit down and work out their differences in order to reach a political solution that is fair, permanent, and acceptable.
The UN Security Council report, which described the Moroccan initiative as serious, constructive, and credible, urged Morocco and the Polisario Front to hold direct talks. Meanwhile, Morocco continued to develop its plan for a solution based on autonomy in Western Sahara. We do not have a problem with the word self-determination mentioned in the proposal. Since it was established, the UN has advocated for the self-determination of nations.
Morocco has recently proposed a plan for a solution based on autonomy. This plan has opened the door for negotiations, and at the same time, it did not rule out the referendum issue.
Meanwhile, the UN Security Council requested its Secretary General to provide a report on the progress of the negotiations by July 30th, 2007.
Autonomy is a self-government rule, and it is a regime rule. Consequently, the autonomous government in Morocco's southern region will take charge of running the affairs of its people. The regional government will run itself and look after the region locally, economically, and politically. In order to govern freely the affairs of the region, the autonomous government is likely to establish local institutions that are run by elected officials.
Morocco welcomed the UN Security Council resolution, which described the Moroccan initiative as serious and constructive. The Moroccan government said that it was ready to hold direct talks with the Polisario Front in order to move forward and end decades of animosity, which hampered Moroccan efforts to build the great Arab Maghreb.
Morocco described the UN Security Council resolution as positive because it will help resolve the Western Sahara problem once and for all. And as requested by all parties in the dispute, the UN proposes a solution that is democratic, permanent, and acceptable.
This is the first time the UN issues a resolution that mandates a permanent solution to the conflict in the region. The ball is now in the court of the Polisario Front to enter into the negotiations with good intentions and without malice. The Moroccan initiative, which was described by the UN as serious, credible, and constructive, included several concessions. To show good intention, we added the phrase, "The initiative is subject to negotiations."
The UN Security Council resolution, which paved the way for a political solution that is permanent and acceptable by all sides, stressed that negotiations are the only way to end this 30-year-old problem in the Western Sahara.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters, or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. If you value this program, please send your tax-deductible contribution to Link TV, either through the website or the mailing address listed on your screen. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only.